Okay, we're live right now. Thank you so much. Hello, good afternoon. I am Adebayo, a management consultant with Incel Consulting, a boutique management consulting firm here in Lagos. I'm your host on the Performance Tools Show. On this episode titled Bridging the Skills Gap, Insight from Kraft and CLO. I'll be interviewing Epedeme Pamebasi. She's the Chief Learning and Diversity Officer for Kraft Heinz Company. Pame, thank you for honoring my invitation.
It is my honor to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Thank you, Pame. I mean, we've been having this conversation for almost for over 6 months now.
Absolutely.
Trying to schedule a convenient time like this. And I'm so excited that it's happening today. Thank you so much. Thank
Fantastic.
you, thank you, thank you. So before we take a deep dive, let me just quickly thank my viewers wherever you are. I'm streaming live here in Lagos, Nigeria. It is 1 p.m. here in Lagos, Nigeria. But before we take a deep dive, let me just run you through what we'll be discussing today. Pamela and I will look at skills gap and why should organizations generally and even individuals, why should you care? Then also how organizations can close the skill gaps. Also, who is responsible for learning in organizations? Is it the CLO? Is it the manager? I mean, we'll look at that. Then also how you can become a lifelong learner. It's one concept that people talk a lot about these days. Then, of course, we're going to look at Pame's passion project, my 52 weeks of worship. We're going to look at that. So, Pame, before we start, I'd just like you to quickly introduce yourself to my audience all around the world. Let them know who Pame Basi is. Thank you.
Fantastic, sure. So my name is Pame, and I am a lifelong learner. I love laughter, words, big ideas, and serving my community. So when I think about all the things that drive me, those are some of my passions. As you mentioned, I am the Chief Learning and Diversity Officer at the Kraft Heinz company, which means my responsibility is to drive an inclusive culture of continuous learning, bold creativity, and intellectual curiosity through our training and our learning initiatives. We've got 40,000 employees across 40 countries, and nurture, frankly, all the things that each of those 40,000 employees do every day to create a diverse and inclusive culture. And so that's what I do. I've been in learning and development for a really long time. If I tell you how many years, then you'll start doing the math, and nobody needs to do math this morning. Started in consulting myself, moved into independent consulting. So I had my own company for a number of years. Entrepreneurship is in my blood, and returned to corporate, first at BlackRock in New York, an asset management company, and now at Kraft Heinz. I'm based in Chicago. As you can tell by my name, I am Nigerian, born in America. Both of my parents born and raised in Nigeria. My family is all over Nigeria and all over the world. So there are many reasons why I'm happy to be here today on your show.
Oh, great, great. In fact, a lot of people have been asking me that, are you a Nigerian?
Yes, sir. I am, mother and father, and I have an enormous family. It's funny. I was just I was talking to a friend, and they said, "Where's the first place you want to travel once all this pandemic situation is over?" And I said, "I want to go to Nigeria so I can visit my cousins and my aunts and uncles. I haven't been home in now 3 years. Usually, I try to go every 2 years or so."
Oh, great. That's good. I'm sure a lot of people are listening now because they've been asking, "Are you in Nigeria?" They can't trace you to have it. It's interesting. It's interesting. And let me also appreciate you for the amazing work that you're doing. Since we connected, I mean, it's been tremendous. I mean, I've seen a lot of your work online, the kind of content that you share online. Just yesterday, there's an offline group that I have, and I shared your presentation on LinkedIn with the lady. I mean, she came back and was like, "Wow, this is amazing! This is amazing!" And I must really thank you for that, family. Thank you so much for all these things that you're doing out there. Thank you.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I think it's good to take a deep dive right now to really look at I said it would be good to take a deep dive right now, look at what we need to discuss today out there. Okay, so
So I'm having a little difficulty hearing you. Okay, maybe. Okay, patience is a virtue. And as Adedoyin is coming back, I'm happy to share a little bit when he mentioned the LinkedIn presentation. I know we're going to talk a little bit about that shortly, about the importance of a learning culture and as being a learning leader and modeling what that looks like in your life, in your community, and in your organizations. We're talking about the skills gap. We're talking about the importance of being a lifelong learner. And one of the things that I was able to do as a chief learning and diversity officer at Kraft Heinz, right when I walked in the door, is make a decision that I was going to be someone who modeled lifelong learning for my organization. And as he mentioned, if you follow me on LinkedIn, you'll see that I post a lot of articles about learning. I'm constantly learning. I'm constantly trying to lean in the challenge of embracing my role as a learner, embracing my role as a superpower, and sharing how important it is to know that learning is not always easy, but it's always important. And at this point, especially in a situation in this world where business is changing so rapidly, it's super important to think of yourself as a learner. It's important to embrace your learning superpower. And it's important to know that if you face challenges, or if you're stepping into a new role, or if you are, faced with a new question that you don't have answers to, that being a lifelong learner is super important. So Adedoyin, I was just talking a little bit about when you mentioned my LinkedIn learning presentation and the importance of modeling learning as a leader, the importance of lifelong learning. And I know we're going to talk more about that. So certainly.
Exactly, we will. So let's start the conversation right away. I of the world right now, the pandemic and all of that. I always want to consider that. But we all know that the coronavirus has upended life and work as we know it. Pamik, can you share with us the lessons you've learned during this challenging period as it relates to your work, learning, and all of that generally?
Absolutely. I would say that every person, every family, every community, every organization experienced disruption at an enormous amount. And certainly I've been in technology-enabled learning for my entire career, but we were all thrown into a situation where learning had to be virtual, that we had to figure out how to learn and connect without the benefit of being in the same room, in the same area. And so a couple of things I learned as a learning professional, having to take all of the courses and programs and plans we had for our organization and transform them into fully virtual learning experiences certainly was a challenge, one that we were up to. I know that different people had different perspectives as to how long this would go on, but very early, my team and I got together and said, look, let's just assume that 2020, and this was way back in March, April, that we're going to have to do everything virtually. And so transforming everything into a virtual format. But, even more personally as a human and as a leader, being in a time where we knew we were working in such a lack of clarity, things were happening that we didn't know what to do with. And as a leader, people are looking to you to answer questions that have no answers. And if I was a lifelong learner before, I certainly am now. And I really, really do believe that in times of crisis, you have to lean into learning as your superpower and determine, okay, this is something new. This is something challenging. How can I learn my way through it? What do I need to learn? And how can I find access to that information? And very broadly, how can I decide who I want to be in the middle of that storm? And then let that direct my learning and my growing.
Great. Thank you. So I picked something there. There's still lack of clarity, to be sincere. Everywhere you turn to, things still look very easy, kind of. But if we zoom in to look at business executives, what should business executives focus on in helping their organizations deal with and also emerge from the COVID-19 pandemic as a result of these challenges?
Sure. Well, I mean, for me, I work in the food industry, and certainly we realized very, very quickly that we would be the work that we do. And I say we, and I'm talking about, our 25,000 employees who work in manufacturing, logistics, and the factories, and actually creating are producing the food and getting it out to people so they can continue to live and eat and work. I think that trying to focus on how to continue to produce, how to adjust your rituals and routines so that you're able to work effectively. One of the things that we learned that we will continue to draw from is the importance of communication. And effective communication, because certainly, at the beginning of here in the U.S., when we were, working from home and we were quarantined, we were having communication meetings constantly, daily, just to check in. How are we doing? How are we dealing with these challenges? How do we, make decisions where we don't know how to make decisions? And so, for executives, I think the ability to be resilient, to determine how to practice resilience, how to practice making decisions, especially when you have incomplete information, and frankly, how to pace yourself, manage your energy, because a lot of corporations are talking about burnout. And I say corporations, people, families, communities. This has been a challenging 18 months for most of the world, and people are tired. And so how do we manage our energy so we can continue to deliver in the way that we need to deliver as humans and as families, communities, organizations?
Great. Being resilient, effective communication, also managing your energy. I mean, those are wonderful points. So now I'd like us to really talk about this skills gap thing. What is skills gap, and why should organizations care?
Sure. I mean, to make it very simple, a skills gap is simply that there are certain skills that are necessary to deliver in this world, in every company, in every organization and business. And that research shows that there are not enough people with those skills to fill those jobs, to do those roles, to actually drive those agendas. And why should we care? I mean, certainly, one of our company values of the Kraft Heinz company is we champion great people. Great people and great teams are what drive the work. We are all human resources professionals, whether or not you know it or not. And so from the business of trying to make sure, for example, your company has a strategy, you're trying to accomplish certain targets, you're trying to deliver to your consumers, your customers, you're trying to live your purpose. It is people who drive that, and people who need to have specific skills. And if there is a gap there, that is what is of concern to many companies today.
Great. So now we've identified what skill gap is. Of course, then also why should organizations care? How about individuals? Why should individuals care about this skill gap?
Absolutely. I am one who, really, if you talk to me for more than 2 minutes, you know that I'm passionate about encouraging people to take ownership of their own learning and development. And certainly that is something that was instilled in me as a young person. As you know, our culture, we are very focused on education and development, but certainly also as a professional, people should care about this skills gap, because it takes a belief and a knowledge that you can embrace learning as your superpower. That if you find yourself in a situation where you're being disrupted, even intentionally or unintentionally, for personal development, you need to, learn some skills or capabilities for a new job, or you want to move into a different situation or take advantage of an opportunity, then you should really be aware that people are looking for people who can step up into different roles and transform themselves professionally and continue to be lifelong learners. We're at a time where, if you know something, very quickly that thing will change. You have to be a continuous learner, because the half-life, if you will, of a specific skill or capability is getting shorter and shorter as things move faster and faster and evolve. And I would say, industries are being disrupted. So the question always is, what you know today, how valuable will that be tomorrow? And certainly as individuals, I think there is a real opportunity, if you are a learner, to embrace that and say, I will learn my way through this career. I will learn my way through the opportunities that I see, so that I can continue to grow as a person and as a member of a community or organization.
Wonderful. That's awesome, Pammy. I mean, that takes us to what people usually say, or what scholars out there have said, that the shelf life of skill is around between 1 to 5 years. Now it's even about a year. How true or how real is this when we look at it from what people do within our organizations, essentially?
I think it's extremely real. And if you make it very personal, you think about technologies that you use now, just like every day, that didn't even exist 20 years ago, or companies that are household names that didn't exist 15 years ago. So there's constant innovation and disruption. And for the industries that have not yet been disrupted, and by mean disruption, I mean, there may be some companies or some offerings that are, hundreds of years old, generations old, and companies that are 2, 3, 4, 5 years old are finding a new way to tackle those same problems. So when you see that disruption, it's not so, it shouldn't be so odd to think that in 5 years, we'll be seeing companies and we'll see products that we don't even know exist yet. And when you look forward to solving problems that don't have answers, it's really important to have someone who's a learner, who's not deterred by tackling, say, well, I don't know the answer to that problem. I have no idea how to change the way we deliver our product to consumers, but I'm willing to, roll up my sleeves and innovate and be creative and be curious about new ways to do old things. And so I think it's absolutely, it makes a lot of sense. Even if you look at kind of how the things that you use in every day and the things you depend on that didn't even exist 20 years ago.
True. Very, very correct. I quite agree with that. But now, people usually talk about, I've seen someone or some group of people saying that right now, some will say that who should be responsible, or who should take responsible for investment in reskilling or upskilling, upskilling effort. Is it an individual, as part of your own personal development? Should you be solely responsible for reskilling or upskilling yourself, or it should be a shared responsibility between your organization and yourself? So I want you to clearly explain that, so that my audience can get to know, okay, this is the part I need to take, this is the part I need my organization to take, as it applies to her there.
Sure. Shortly after I started this role, I created what we call a value proposition for learners. And it really is an agreement between, me as a learning professional, my peers, my team, and employees. And to your point, it should be shared. In that value proposition, I said, we expect employees to learn like an owner, so take ownership of their own learning and development, so they can execute with excellence, because certainly execution and delivering results is expected, accelerate their learning careers. Their learning curves, and grow great careers. So if I expect you to take ownership and execute, then what comes on the other side of that is that you're able to grow a great career. I happen to humbly say that I work for a fantastic company with a great learning culture, lots of great offerings, courses and programs, and we're always thinking about how to make sure we're giving people opportunities to learn and develop. So I believe it is shared. But I absolutely believe, and beyond even the walls of my professional experience, that any person who takes ownership of their own learning and development will see success. Because first you learn how to learn, which may sound like, well, doesn't everybody know how to learn? No, learning is not always easy. It's not always smooth when you step out of the comfort zone and you into a place where you're like, I don't know any of this. You have to, you have to push through. You have to have some grit. But once it's like a muscle, once you keep doing that, you think of yourself as someone, when you see a challenge, no problem. What do I need to know to move through this? And becoming that kind of person who learns and knows how to learn makes you more valuable to yourself, your family, your community, your organization. So certainly personal responsibility, I think, is super important and yields value. But in the best case scenario, there is a partnership, so that if I decide I want to learn, then someone is giving me the opportunity, and valuable opportunities relevant to, for example, the challenges that an organization is having. That way I say, I raise my hand and I look around and I say, okay, I know if I take this course, or if I take this stretch assignment, or whatever that learning place is, I can grow.
Great. Thank you, Pammy. Let's I'd like to probe a little bit down, and I'd like to ask a question. I know that when you look at the modern day learner, there's this complaint around time. An average modern day learner will always come with a complaint around time. I don't have the time. In fact, it was a conversation we started having yesterday. That's why I shared your video with someone within my network. She said she created an initiative, and she found out that nobody, within the organization, people were complaining a lot about time. So now, I want us to look at it, or to let us know what it will really take to encourage employees to take ownership of their own development. Now, we've identified that, okay, it should be a shared responsibility. But for individual now, how should individual go about taking ownership of his or her own personal development?
Sure. And here's where I get to tell you one of my favorite stories. You talked about my passion projects, and this is one of them. I have a project that I started in February of 2019 and ended in a year later, called my 365 Days of Learning, where I made a commitment to learn something new every day and share it with my organization. We have an internal social media platform called the Catch app, which of course,
oh, great.
Right, exactly. What else do we call it? Right. We are Kraft, Heinz. And so I had this platform, and I was brand new in my role. And to your point about being a lifelong learner, I said, I want to show people what it looks like to make time for learning. And so, anywhere from 5 minutes a day to, a podcast, reading an article. I got really good at finding articles, 15 minutes a day. Back when we were having face-to-face learning, sometimes it was one of our nomination-based programs where I was in a room with our senior leaders for 3, 4, 5 hours. But literally every day I would say, this is what I learned, and this is where I got this information from our corporate learning environment, because I too was getting used to what was even in there. And after about 100 days, I was like, wow, it's hard, right, to learn something new every day, but I've made this commitment. And then other people started joining me, making their own commitments. And by the end of the year, we had launched an internal campaign called Learn Like an Owner, where 500 employees had made a commitment. And then last year we doubled that. And this year we just determined that we have exceeded our 2020 numbers. But it is the modeling. When you're saying, sure, am I busy? Absolutely. Is everybody busy? Absolutely. I respect that. I know that there are corporations that are, and all of my peers having conversations about how to carve out time, give people like dedicated no meeting time or no meetings after this time on Friday. But before that happens, as a personal practice, to say, I'm going to take 15 minutes a day to learn. And again, it's creating a habit. It's finding your trusted sources. For many months, I would just Google, a topic and Harvard Business Review to find an article that I knew I could consume in 15 minutes that would broaden my perspectives. So it's really modeling for the people who look up to you to say, this is what it looks like to be a lifelong learner. And it doesn't have to take a lot of time. And once you experience how that enriches your life, then you are motivated to make more time for learning. And maybe that's when some of the more intensive programs and the more demanding learning experiences seem like not an intrusion on your time. I like to say it's not in the way, it is the way. And that's, I think, how I approach it, or how I have approached it.
Wow, that's great. That's great. It's not about how big the volume, but it's about forming an habit around it. 15 minutes, 10 minutes, small articles, podcast, and all of that, and you keep on doing it continuously. Wow, wow, that's good. So I would then like us to talk about the culture of learning, because we hear a lot. We hear a lot this concept of culture of learning, but in reality, it's not always so. And I know that your organization, Kraft, is known as an organization with a learning culture. But as a leader within the talent development space, how do you think SMEs, small and medium enterprise right now, how do you think they can foster an open culture of knowledge and shared learning that supports the business? Because most of the time, we see organizations, we see people, they talk a lot about they want to have this culture of learning. But in reality, it looks like something difficult to do. But for an SME, how do you think small business owners can initiate this culture of learning within their business or businesses, as it were?
Sure. And as I mentioned, I was an entrepreneur for 13 years at a very small company. Was mostly me and working with other independents. And so I know the challenges of being a small business owner. Currently I work in a very large enterprise, but haven't always done that. I think the philosophy is the same, because it really takes one leader. Really, one, and I don't know if you've ever seen the TEDx, the TED Talk around the dancing guy on the side of a mountain who talks about how to create a movement. If you haven't, if you literally Google dancing guy on the side of the mountain, you'll see the leadership. And it takes one kind of lone nut to say, this is something that's important to me. And one first follower. So in my 365 days of learning, I was learning and sharing, which is really important, for almost 100 days before one of my colleagues said, hey, I'm going to make a learning commitment too. And I was so thankful to see her, because after the second person comes, then other people start coming. And then now we're talking about thousands. And so even in a small or medium enterprise, the learning culture is created by the commitment to learning that you see it either from leadership, because a lot of us at talent management professionals talk about it has to be, we all want sponsorship from the top of the house, from the senior leaders. But it can be anybody in an organization who says, you know what, I am going to commit to learning something new every day. And I'm going to share with people what I'm learning. And if I'm thoughtful about it, I can say, what challenges are we facing as a business, as an enterprise? Is it, how do we create a new enterprise strategy or strategy for the business? Is there something specific around technology that we need to know? How can we, refresh our finance or our marketing functions? I am a big proponent of just starting with learning whatever. Just learn, just find things to enrich your mind. But if you're in a small business and you need to be more targeted, then take that 5 or 10 or 15 minutes to locate articles or online courses, which are just everywhere, talking to subject matter experts internally in your company and outside of the company about the things that challenge you, and share what you're learning. Other people will then say, wow, Adedoyin is coming to meetings with new ideas. I better, do something as well. And then that's how a culture in a grassroots way builds. So I think that's something that any company of any size can embrace. It takes 1 or 2 people to do that.
Great. I have a question here. Someone sent in a question to me, and I'd like to ask that. The person says that the future of learning is no longer in the classroom; it is in the field. How true? How true is that?
I know what that person means, because a lot of people think of learning as I'm sitting in a chair looking at a professor at the front of the room, or I'm sitting in a workshop and there's a facilitator at the front of the room. I believe that the world is your classroom, that learning happens where it happens. And certainly as a learning professional, when you talk about 70, 20, 10, that just the 10% is what happens in a classroom in formal learning. There's a larger percent that happens. You learn by doing out in the world. You learn from experts. You learn having other kinds of experiences. So I would say, based on the intention of that question, I agree. Learning happens where it happens. It doesn't have to be. And especially now, some people, even after a year of fully virtual learning, believe you have to be in the same room. I don't think that's true at all. There are lots of different ways to learn where people are in different locations. And most importantly, learning by doing within the context that's related to whatever the topic is, so that you can connect what you're learning with what you actually have to do with that learning.
I have another one here that says that, questions were coming. People said a lot of questions. Someone said here that, so that you mentioned that how can learning be one superpower? That's a wonderful quote. How can learning be your superpower? You can learn and not be rich, but
what is a superpower? A superpower is what you lean towards. It's your strength. It's what you know can get you through tough times. When you're facing a challenge, you're like, what can I do to address that challenge? What do I bring to a team where they say, Pam's really good at that, let her do that. I really do believe learning is a superpower, and a commitment to learning can help you to be great in your current role, as you grow a career in your life. And so really embracing that you are the kind of person we talk about. I don't know if you heard about growth mindset, and Carol Dweck's from Stanford University, her research around thinking of yourself not as someone who's got a finite mind, but as someone who could learn anything if you just put your mind to it. That, I believe, is a superpower, because then you never walk into a room and you think, I don't know what to do here. Or I don't know, I can't do this. You think of yourself as someone who says, what do I need to know to face this challenge, and how can I acquire that knowledge? And I feel like that it's certainly one of my superpowers. I think it's a superpower that anyone can just kind of claim and embrace and use as you're facing challenges in life and in work.
Wow, that's interesting. Someone trying to ask a question around tracking the impact of learning. That even without going into the deep analysis, that is it possible to just limit it to satisfaction surveys and also skill growth assessments? That how do you go? How have you done it using some of these simple methodology to track the impact of learning in your organization?
Sure, this is the $1 million question for anyone who's in corporate learning, right? Anyone who truly solves this problem has done a great thing. Along my career, we tracked impact of learning anywhere from dollars saved, in travel and entertainment, to number of people completing a course. Those are nice things to put on a slide, but not as important as saying, how have we changed behavior? So, right, if I take a course in a specific topic, did I learn enough that when I went back to, my day-to-day, that my behavior was changed? I was actually doing things in a new way. And so certainly, yes, we have satisfaction surveys. Certainly, yes, we are using skills assessments, but also pushing the envelope to move the conversation to, we sent people to, and this is, I'm saying, programs and courses that are outside of just my intellectual curiosity. We sent you because we needed you to learn this skill. When you went back to your desk, were you doing things differently? Were you behaving differently? And having surveys over the course of time to really tackle that question and be able, right now, every year we have a learning impact report. This is what we did. This is the impact we had, but continuing to evolve so that we can communicate with our business leaders that the time you send your employees to a learning program is well spent in a very tactical way that's tied to the same language you use as a business leader to value and to measure impact.
Wow, that's great. We can't answer all the questions, but I'd like us to talk around your passion project. And I'll first of all even like to share. Let me see if I can share your TED Talk. I've watched that TED Talk over and over again. Let me see if I can share so that people can see.
Wow. Okay.
5:30 a.m. Monks in orange floor-length robes hold prayer beads in their hands and wear them around their necks as they complete their morning tasks and prepare for the day. A low, continuous buzz fills the Hare Krishna temple in San Diego, California, as the faithful speak and chant ancient and powerful mantras. A Swami, dressed in ornate robes, sits on a decorated altar in the corner of the temple. He meditates with a laser focus, not moving a muscle for hours. 11 a.m. Thousands of worshipers in colorful African attire pray loudly and fervently. Energetic head motions and hand gestures accompany their prayers. Frenetic group energy electrifies the enormous tent. A sea of plastic chairs as far as the eye can see, but no one is seated. Everyone is on their feet, praising and worshiping at a massive Pentecostal church in Lagos, Nigeria. 4 p.m. A woman approaches the labyrinth, tucked away among the trees, at a retreat in Tecate, Mexico. First, she approaches the entrance, takes a deep breath, then begins the walk. Those mid-walk silently beckon her to join. They seamlessly invite her to relax, relate, reflect. In the center of the labyrinth, a man.
Pamela, let's talk about let's talk about that. About my 52 weeks of worship.
Quietly contemplating the mysteries of the maze.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a magical day.
Honestly, tell us what exactly is that passion project all about? Sure. I know you've written a book about it. Yes.
Yeah, sure. And I can tell you about the project, but it makes sense to just go back and say what motivated the project. And in 2009, I had what I call a personally challenging year. It was a really difficult year. I lost my grandmother. She lived in Benin City. She was the only grandmother I ever knew, my mother's mother. And again, one connection that I had to Nigeria and my Nigerianness. I had only met her a couple of times in my life because I lived in the US and she lived in Nigeria, but she was someone who impacted my life very deeply. That happened in April. I lost her. And then in August, I lost my father. Ifram Insea Bassi. And he was just a champion, a giant in my life. And a lot of the reason why I was able to know so much about who I am. And then I had another challenge that was, being betrayed by a loved one. And so at the end of that year of loss, my response to it, and I didn't know, again, I've been a lifelong learner. I've always looked at things from different perspectives. And the response to those challenges, which really were devastating to me, was to decide that I was going to learn my way through it. I was going to spend a week for a year, every week in a different place of worship, and ended up traveling from the south side of Chicago to South Africa, from Brazil to Brooklyn. And as you saw in the beginning of that, I did spend some time, of course, in Lagos and knowing the enormous services, very energetic services, spent some time there. And really at the time, I was just trying to see what people did when they needed to celebrate, when they needed to deal with challenges, when they wanted to seek God's face, the face of the divine. And I wanted to see goodness in a lot of different ways. And I did. And so that was 11 years ago. I wrote the book in 2012. I did this TED Talk in 2018. And I do say it's the foundation of my inclusion practice now as I'm a chief diversity officer, being able to walk into a space that's not familiar to me, retain my own beliefs and stand in my own convictions, but respect others who may believe and live so very differently than me. It's a project that, has inspired all the other projects after that, and really was life-changing. And I continue to love speaking about it whenever I can.
Wow, it's life-changing, because when I watched that TED Talk, I began to picture it. So for 52 weeks, virtually every blessed week.
Right.
No, Pammy, let's for 52 weeks, you were moving from one interfaith center to another.
Sure.
Wow. That's touching. That's touching for me, I must say. That's touching. Well, it's touching, I must say. Well, for us to conclude, I know that you are also a trained comedian.
I love when this one sneaks into a webinar. I love it. It's great. We talk about superpowers. Laughter is also one of my superpowers. I embrace it fully. It's one of the things I love most in life.
So, where is comedy in all of this? And do you still practice comedy?
Comedy is in all of it. Every corporate space, every time I walked into a situation where I thought, what is happening here? There were times in that project where I was just like, I don't know, I'm just going to sit silently and observe because I'm not really sure how to process this. It happens professionally all the time where I'm walking into a room and I process things through comedy. I think any good leader who ever has to present anything knows that a good joke can just disarm the group and give you the opportunity to get closer, to break down barriers and really have some great conversations. And frankly, you'll appreciate this. I wanted to be a stand-up comedian my whole life, but I was like, who's going to tell my parents I want to be a stand-up comedian? I'm not going to do it. I valued my life far too much. And so you talk about doctor, lawyer, engineer, the Bassi girls check all them off, and I'm the computer scientist. So certainly it's something that I loved. It was not something I felt like I could pursue given the direction I was given as a young woman. But when I left consulting and I started my own company, what I also did in the middle of those two things was go start to work at a startup, which did not last. And after that startup died, I thought, well, what the heck? I'll study comedy. And so I studied comedy at Second City at the same time that I started my company, because again, I got to multitask. That's who I am. But I just think whatever you love, whoever you are, whatever delights you should also be part of your life. I am someone who believes very strongly in learning. Clearly, accomplishment and achievement I find value in, but also comedy is a love, and doing that side by side with the work I do in learning and development and diversity, inclusion, and talent management is how I choose to walk through the world.
Wow. Wow, I don't want this show to end.
I'm here. We're colleagues. We're friends. No worries. I really appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation, and would love to know all of the different things, the questions that we weren't able to answer, etc. But I really do. I would say that just embrace the fact that learning is something that can really be transformative for you, for your family, for your community, for your organization. That's how I live my life every day.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your generosity. I mean, it's not even more like a question and answer session. It's more like we're just gisting. Thank you so much, Pammy. I really, really appreciate you.
Fantastic. And next time I'm in Lagos, I'll look you up, because usually I just go straight to my family and I spend time there. But it's I look forward to being able to travel back home and wherever maybe we could grab a cup of coffee and talk more about talent management.
Exactly. I'll be so excited too. I'll be so excited to see you. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time. Thank you. Yeah. Bye.